The Smoking Glass Hour believes in giving back and giving credit where credit is due. Our number one goal is to make a difference. The music you hear on the Smoking Glass Hour comes from Purple Planet Music. They can be found at www.purple-planet.com. Go check them out.
Game-changing innovation will always be at the heart of the Smoking Glass Hour and our goal to make a difference. Just as our message has evolved to meet the challenges of the 21st century, so is our approach to community engagement. We believe when people talk, differences can be made. We believe when diversity exists, it's a pathway to success. Tune in to our live broadcast, social media messages, and join our Make a Difference campaign. Let us massage your ears. Tune in at www.thesmokingglasshour.com or catch us on social media at Barron Glass Hour. We are on the move in the 21st century. Join us.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Smoking Glass Hour with Barron Glass. We are honored to have you as a guest tonight and want to thank each of you for your faithful support. Without further delay, allow me to introduce to you Mr. Barron Glass. Mr. Glass, take it away.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the Smoking Glass Hour with Barron Glass tonight. As a result of many conversations in the last week or two, a good friend of mine who is going to be joining us tonight, and I'll announce the guest in a moment. But we've been sitting back talking about different things that's been going on within the African American community as well as the United States of America. Last night we were able to listen in on one of the other shows, Pastor A.F. Riggins' show. And I was a little bit discouraged by some of the leadership that we have, or so-called leadership that we have, that is driving the sheep, in my opinion, in the wrong direction. So one of the guests and we were talking as the show was going on. And the question that was asked last night is, what moral definition could a minister give that will dictate or determine or encourage someone to vote for Donald Trump? Because we know that if you are a leader should never lead the sheep to or toward division. As a result of that conversation last night, it struck me why the black community should take a hard look at Bernie Sanders before voting out of obligation for Hillary Clinton. Now, we are not saying this. We are not saying that. We're saying choose and choose ye wisely. Tonight, I'm going to be joined by Mr. Dave Lamont, Screams from the Center out of Colorado. I will also be joined by Miss Nikki Bedrick from Las Vegas, Nevada. And one of the very own from one of the other stations, a good friend and activist and a very intelligent young man, Mr. Aaron Hopkins. Aaron, Nikki, and Dave, how are you guys doing tonight? Dave, I'm going to start with you, then we'll go to Nick, and then we'll go to Aaron. How you doing, Dave?
I'm doing good. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing fine, Nikki, how are you doing?
I'm doing wonderful, Barron. And you, Dave?
I'm doing great.
Good.
Mr. Hopkins, how are you doing?
Yes, sir. I'm doing wonderful. And I'm glad to be on tonight and eager to get into this subject.
Well, I'll tell you, Aaron, you know that you and I have been conversing for the last 2 or 3 days specifically about this. And the other night, I was talking with Screen from the Center, Dave Lamont, and he brought up a very good position that we might need to start focusing on a very, very low group, the African American group, when it comes to voting for Democrats. But what we need to do, Aaron, and I believe you will join Nikki and Dave, we need to make sure that we are telling the absolute truth when it comes to these individual candidates. So without further delay, we're going to get specific. Now, none of us tonight are going to be talking just to hear our voices. What we want to do is convince other people that they should at least consider other candidates without voting out of obligation simply because she's a female, simply because she's been the first lady, and simply because she's been the Secretary of State and has been in politics for the last 30 years. We know this right here. We know that Hillary Clinton loves black people, and black people love Hillary Clinton. Black politicians have lined up in droves to endorse her, eager to prove their loyalty to the Clintons in hopes that their faithfulness will be remembered and rewarded. Black pastors themselves are opening their church doors, and the Clintons are making themselves comfortably at home once again, engaging effortlessly in all the usual rituals associated with courting the black vote, a pursuit that typically begins and ends with Democratic politicians making black people feel liked and taken seriously. Doing something concrete to improve the conditions under which most black people live is generally not required. Well, it seems that we, black people, are her winning card, one that Hillary is eager to play. And it seems, Aaron Hopkins, we are eager to play once again. Now, the love affair between black folk and the Clintons has been going on for a long, long time. It began somewhere back in 1992 when Bill Clinton was running for president. But here's what he did. He threw on some shades, Aaron Hopkins, and he played the saxophone on the Arsenio Hall show. It seems silly in retrospect, but many of us black people, we fell for that. At a time when a popular slogan was, "It's a black thing," you wouldn't understand. Bill Clinton seemed to get what we were talking about. But when Toni Morrison dubbed him our first black president, we nodded our heads. We had our boy in the White House, or at least we thought we did. Black voters have been remarkably loyal to the Clintons for more than 25 years. It is true that we eventually lined up behind Barack in 2008, but it's a measure of the Clintons, allure that Hillary led Obama among black voters until he started winning caucuses and primaries back several years ago. Now, once again, Hillary is running. This time, she's facing a Democratic socialist who promises a political revolution that will bring universal health care, a living wage, an end to rampant Wall Street greed, and the dismantling of the vast prison state. Many of the same goals that Martin Luther King championed at the end of his life. Even so, my friends, black folks are sticking in with the Clinton brand. But here's the deal. What have the Clintons done to earn such devotion? Did they take extreme political risk to defend the rights of African Americans? Did they courageously stand up to the right-wing demagoguery about black communities? Did they help usher in a new era of hope and prosperity for neighborhoods devastated by deinstitutionalization, deindustrialization, globalization, and the disappearance of work? Well, guess what? No, it was quite the opposite. When Bill Clinton ran for president, hundreds of thousands of manufacturing jobs had vanished. Globalization had affected all across the country. Crime rates spiked in inner cities. Communities that have been dependent on factory jobs while hopelessness, despair, and crack addiction swept neighborhoods that had once been solidified by the working class. Guess what? Millions of black folk, many of whom had fled Jim Crow segregation in the South with the hope of obtaining decent work in the northern factory, were suddenly trapped in racially segregated, jobless ghetto. Now, Mr. Aaron Hopkins, Dave Lamont, and Nikki Bedrick, I'm going to give each one of you guys, and I'll start with the lady first. We have titled tonight, Why the Black Community Should Take a Hard Look at Bernie Sanders Before Voting Out of Obligation for Hillary Clinton. Miss Bedrick, why should people take a look at Bernie Sanders before they vote out of obligation for Hillary Clinton, in your own way?
Baron, I think a look at Bernie Sanders' social justice record over 30 years, is an indicator of where the man is morally and socially and economically. I go back to many of us watched the debate last night. It's very apparent he was an activist in the 60s. And in the 60s, I came of age in the late 60s. In the 60s, if you were white and you were seeing what was going on in America, you were an activist. You were in whole hog. You were in whole hog. You were in morally. You knew the wrong and the horror of what was being done and participated in by most. So I identify with Bernie in that particular phase. When you look at the record, when you look at his record over, he's charged with not having introduced many bills. Vermont is a small state. But when I look at Bernie's voting record over the year, he voted against the death penalty. He voted to, a bill was introduced that stopped federal Pell Grants to prisoners so they could, to further education in prisons, which was one of the known factors in reducing recidivism. He voted against that bill. It passed, and he stood with the Black Caucus when he did that, which was an unusual kind of vote. He was one of, I think, only 3 white men who did it. He made a trip to Nicaragua in the 80s, and he called the war there, and that was our shady dealings in South America. He called the wars there war on the people, war on women and children. He was in a picket line against NAFTA, screaming that moving American businesses to Mexico and China, how could possibly an American compete at wages of 25 to 65 cents? He did support the crime bill. His reasoning was, it's my only reservation, his reasoning was that it had a 10-year ban on assault weapons. But he also gave a speech on the Senate floor before that bill passed. And it talked about how this bill was punitive towards minorities, that we have to put half the nation in jail. We were more focused on revenge and imprisonment than rehabilitation. And he predicted in that speech how terrible that would be for minorities. I like Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders' moral record through a lot of years. I think the position has been the same. He voted twice against the Iraq War. And it's always on some kind of humanitarian, moral, social justice platform that he stands. And it's been consistent. That's why I think the black community should look at Bernie Sanders.
Okay, Dave Lamont, Screens from the Center, Colorado. Tell us, and we're going to get off into the discussion, but give us your thesis as to why you feel that the black community should consider Bernie Sanders before voting for Hillary Clinton out of obligation.
Well, I'm not going to try to presume to do any better than she did at touting the positives to Bernie Sanders.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to point out a few things. You know me, I tend to go with more of an intellectual bend on some things.
And that's fine.
I want to go back to what I was saying last time, where I see the Clintons as being a brand that the African-American community invests in. They see Bernie Sanders as an outsider, someone who is not part of the Democratic Party. Sure, he caucuses with the Democrats. He ran with the Democrats many times in his elections over the course of his political career. But he was not a Democrat officially until he ran for president. So I'm looking at it from the perspective of brand loyalty. With that in mind, I want to go into a couple of things that I don't want to tarnish the Clintons too much because, again,
right,
he said that if Hillary is nominated, I'm going to support her fully, get her in the White House. But we do have to look at the background of the Clintons and see where they're coming from and where this disconnect is happening between the Clintons and the African-American community. So we start off with the shift of the African-American vote started in the 1930s under Roosevelt and solidified under Truman when Truman proposed the first Civil Rights Act. That was voted down and not actually put into legislation until, of course, Lyndon Johnson had it passed in the 60s. But that got the attention of the African-American community. And we can see a huge shift in support. And that's where the Democratic brand became the thing that African-Americans looked to. Mm-hmm. Now, they also helped shape it by shifting their loyalty from the Republicans in previous decades to the Democrats. But we have a few people who are outliers. One of them is James William Fulbright. Now, James William Fulbright was a U.S. Senator from Arkansas from 1945 until 1974. And the reason I bring him up is because Bill Clinton, President Bill Clinton, wife of Hillary Clinton, cited him as a mentor. Now, this is an individual who, while he did a lot of great things, creating the Fulbright Scholarship, he was a segregationist and signed on to the Southern Manifesto, which was an incredibly racist document signed by Southern Democrats and some Republicans back in the 50s, and it was led by none other than Strom Thurmond, who was the Democrat who eventually switched over to being a Republican. Mm-hmm. So we have to look at the background that Clinton has, and, you know, he claims this person as an inspiration. When we look at Senator Sanders, and the people he claims it as inspiration are civil rights fighters and civil rights protectors and people who, you know, fought for the poor. He cites Franklin Delano Roosevelt as one of his. Martin Luther King, he was there. So I do question sometimes that the loyalty to the party is manifesting in the form of Hillary Clinton, and we're not looking at her objectively. Now, I know I just talked a lot about Bill Clinton, but I'm married, and my wife and I share a lot of views together, so I make that kind of natural assumption that goes out there that politically we tend to get along fairly well, and I tend to assume the same thing with Bill Clinton. People can correct me if they know the record more, but that's how I think. So I think that Bill Clinton's background is a little relevant in that. We also know that Hillary Clinton, as I've said before, was a Goldwater girl, campaigned for Barry Goldwater, who fought against the Voting Rights Act, against Civil Rights Act. Mm-hmm. He was a segregationist, and he was the beginning of the evil kind of conservative movement that has gone up a notch, several notches, in the form of people like Donald Trump, Marco Rubio, and Ted Cruz. Mm-hmm. So when we look at this history, I sit here and think to myself that we need to try and convince people to get away from just the plain brand loyalty and look outside at someone who has proven themselves to be a positive influence for the community.
Right. I'll tell you, Dave, excellent point. We'll come back to that. Mr. Aaron Hopkins, tell us why you feel in your own way why people should consider Bernie Sanders before voting, as Dave and Nikki has eloquently put it, voting for Hillary Clinton out of obligation.
Well, first of all, Aaron, I applaud you for, again, providing a platform for this type of discussion. It's very clear to me, and I want to be specific from the viewpoint of a 44-year-old African-American male. And I want to, the reason I said specific is because when we're talking about Senator Hillary Clinton and her particular policy outlook, which is leading some of the moves that she's making currently as she bids for the Democratic Party candidacy as the President of the United States. I would go ahead and say that we have not really made a valid consideration of why all loyalty is even present for her in terms of the background that she has, along with former President Bill Clinton. Let me tell you why I said that. And I'm going to read a quote from Senator Clinton in 1994. Now, keep in mind, 1994, I was 23 years old. And the reason, and that's going to be relevant as I read. With respect to the crime bill, I'm quoting Senator Hillary Clinton. I think as more Americans focus on the fact that this bill would have put more police on the streets, would have locked up violent offenders so they never could get out again, would have given more prison construction money available to the states and as well as the federal government, but also have dealt with prevention, giving young people something to say yes to. It's a very well thought out crime bill that is both smart and tough. I think Americans are going to say, why these political games? Why are we once again letting certain special interests call the shots in Washington? And we eventually will eventually get a good crime bill like the president has proposed. The president at that time, of course, was President Bill Clinton. It will just take a little longer than it should have. Now, I quoted Senator Clinton in terms of this crime bill, in terms of its foregoing. Now, let's pass in terms of aftermath. I'm going to read some very eye-opening statistics. Not a whole lot, no.
Go ahead.
Again, I mentioned that in 1994, I personally was 23 years of age. This statistic comes from Statistics of Incarcerated African-American Males. It says approximately 12 to 13% of the American population is African-American. But they make up 60% of the almost 2.1 million male inmates in jail or prison. This comes from the U.S. Department of Justice, 2009. Now, at some point, now we've got to revisit this, the premise that there's a loyalty present, which obviously there is, on behalf of the black community, giving or considering the vote being given to Senator Clinton. Now, my question, Barry, I think you understand where I'm coming from. I think everybody on the line will understand where I'm coming from. I'm questioning the vehicle. How was the loyalty passed from us as a community to Senator Clinton and her husband prior to that, and President Bill Clinton? And I'm glad that Dave mentioned some of how the transfer from the Republican Party with a lot of people that are currently in politics from Republican to Democrat. That's very important. And I said that to say there's a specific demographic in the black community that has always pretty much led us in the direction to vote for Democrats. or Democratic. And on last night, I think we listened to, and it was very clear in my mind that there's the vehicle that's most often used in the political arena to get the black people involved in any political candidacy is always the black church.
Correct.
Almost 100% of the time, candidates who have never shown any black affairs until it's time to go to the polls. Conveniently now, remember that this same vehicle is how they have communicated their desires or their aspirations to become that particular candidate is always communicated through the black church. So as I reflected on that and I thought about it, some of the comments we listened to on last night, I really had to ask the question again, Baron, because the question of loyalty, in terms of what my definition of loyalty is, to me it's an exchange of values. In other words, if you and I consider ourselves friends, then our loyalty is based on something solid. It's not just based on an emotional, you and I get on the phone and we have a good conversation. I say, man, if Baron ever needs me, I'm there for him. Now, that's a good thing, but the expectations are quite different when we're talking about issues like we're talking about right now. We're not talking about, in other words, you mentioned the saxophone playing from President Clinton. And as you mentioned it, you're right. It sounds very silly when you think about that an entire group of people would see or feel some relation to a man who plays a saxophone passionately to a genre of music that we like. And at that same time, we simultaneously will say, that's my man, I'm voting for him. And then after the fact, after that person has gained a benefit from that type of loyalty, then we can go back and visit what did we gain from that relationship. Is the loyalty justified on their behalf? Because if it is, then we can say, well, man, look at what we gained from President Bill Clinton.
And if we take specifically what you just closed with, Aaron, I'm going to bring it back to Nikki and Dave. And I know it's going to be kind of hard for you to answer, but Aaron can come back in if you guys can't. Based on what he just asked, everybody has indicated that the 90s was so good to everybody. My contention is that, well, the 90s was not as good to everybody when we know that Mr. Hopkins just stated that 12 or 13% of the overall population in this country was African American. However, 60% of those represented the prison system. See, because we know that Bill Clinton, presided over the largest increase in federal and state prison inmates of any president in American history. Clinton did not declare the war on crime or the war on drugs. We know that was declared on Reagan. But here's the deal. He escalated it beyond what many conservatives had imagined possible. Guess what? He supported the 100-to-1 sentencing disparity for crack versus powder cocaine, which produced staggering racial injustice in sentencing and boosted funding for drug law enforcement. Let me take it a step further. Clinton championed, he championed the idea of the federal three-strike law, in his 1994 State of the Union address, and much later signed a $30 billion crime bill that created dozens of new federal capital crimes, mandated life sentences for some three-time offenders, and authorized more than $16 billion for state prison grants and the expansion of police forces. The legislation was hailed by mainstream media outlets as a victory for guess who? the Democratic Party, who were able to wrest the crime issue from the Republicans and make it their own. Now, if we go back to what Dave Lamont said, the husband and the wife are usually associated with their beliefs. If this be the case, Nikki, Bedrick, can we say, or is it fair to say rather, or is it fair to assume that former Secretary of State and former First Lady Hillary Clinton basically share these views? And if so, how is this so beneficial to the African American community and the poor community as a whole?
Baron, I really, you'd asked me to zero into something tonight, and and the crime bill her term, and research has shown me what Hillary did, okay, was that term super predator, and these children, she was talking about children, okay, she was talking about your children. It's a new form of kind of teenager child, a super predator, no morality, no conscience, and needs to be healed. What I really focused on tonight was Hillary's advocacy and support of welfare reform and what it has really done to mothers and children. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's as devastating as what the crime bill has done for the men. It's hand in hand, same timeline as what has been done to the men. And Hillary took, there was a term used in Reagan administration, and they called the black mother a welfare queen. Mm-hmm. Everybody knew it was code language for a black mother who was on welfare. Hillary took that term and and I've got the note here, okay, where in 1996, advocating harsh welfare reform, Hillary revised the Reagan stereotype of welfare queen. In her revision, poor women were deficient mothers who need, now these are her words, discipline and training. Her words, much like with her crime bill advocacy of the children who were super predators and needed to be brought to heel. If you were white, you know those words were racial coding into African Americans, and every white knew it. She advocated if a mother who was receiving TANs didn't get her kid immunized, she could be refused her check. If she didn't enroll in a parenting program, she could be refused her check. If she didn't show up for a parent-teacher conference, she could be refused her check. Mm-hmm. So she, in her public portrayal of, in her support of welfare, demonized the poor black working mother and her children. Mm-hmm. And it was systematic, and at the same time that the crime bill was on. I mean, Baron, when I really looked at the correlation between these two, the crime bill and the welfare reform bill.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm going to use the word. I mean, it could be argued it could be argued it was a genocide, like a planned genocide.
Correct.
Because it was the systematic devastation of the black family in America.
Mm-hmm. Dave Lamont, Screens from the Center. Ms. Bedrick once again eloquently pointed out the two specific things which traditionally social issues have always been one of the power structures within the African American community. Do you think, and again, we're not trying to beat Secretary of State Hillary Clinton up, but we must tell facts, and sometimes facts according to truth are not pleasant. So we're not trying to make false allegations or fabricate or anything, because I posted today, if they're talking about Benghazi and all these other things, which calling her a liar, I disagree with that, and I support those who are supporting Hillary, because if you cannot prove what she's done, then she cannot be a liar unless it's proven. It's just like when George Bush lied to the American people to go to war in Iraq, which killed a hell of a lot more people than Benghazi would ever kill. So let's be honest and fair. Dave Lamont, do you feel that this was a plan orchestrated policy-making scheme that was back where Clinton had to give to the African-American community based on these I don't even know what you call it, these things that appeared to be good, but then he had to come back and appeal to, because we know that the crime bill, even the Republicans were surprised that he went this far. What do you think, Dave Lamont?
Okay, so in answering that question, I want to go into a point that Nikki brought up and a point that Aaron brought up. So we'll start with Nikki in what I think may be Bill Clinton either negotiating for something else and offering the crime bill and welfare reform as his end of the bargain. And I want to go back to Reagan advisor Lee Atwater, because she had mentioned dog whistle terminology. Mm-hmm. And Lee Atwater was interviewed in 1988. And he said that because the country changed, we had to change the way we presented what we were trying to accomplish. And the first thing he said was, back in the 40s and 50s, we could say N-word, 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 and he used the word over and over again. And he said we could directly say that. But by the 1960s and 70s, we couldn't do that sort of thing anymore because the times have changed. So we talk about forced busing and states' rights. And that people would know that when we talk about that, we're talking about the African-American community. And then he goes, now we can be even more subtle, and we talk about things like taxation and criminal reform, welfare reform. And he mentioned those kinds of things, and he said that people in the right frame of mind understand that what we're talking about is disenfranchising and putting a disservice on African Americans. So that's the point that I wanted to expand on that Nikki brought up about the whole dog whistle portion.
Okay, I'm gonna bring Aaron Hopkins in on this one, and then I want Nikki and Dave. Now here we are. Another piece of fact. When Bill Clinton left office in 2001, the United States of America had the highest rate of incarceration in the world. Human Rights Watch reported that in 7 states now, African American constituted 80 to 90% of all drug offenders sent to prison, even though they were no more likely than whites to use or sell illegal drugs. Prison admission for drug offenses reached a level in 2000 for African American more than 26 times the level in 1983. All of the presidents since 1980 have contributed to mass incarceration. But as Equal Justice Initiative founder Brian Stevenson recently observed, President Bill Clinton's tenure was the worst. So here's the deal. If the president is given the credit for good, why is all the bad that this guy has brought to the table during his administration is being pushed off to the side? And this is why we chose the topic tonight. Why? Why the black community should take a hard look at Bernie Sanders before voting out of obligation for Hillary Clinton. Aaron Hopkins, you got anything you want to add?
Absolutely. Hopefully I was able to paint a picture based on what everybody has stated on not just the reason why there should be a hard look taken and in terms of the loyalty. Because see, the loyalty factor to me, Baron, is I'm just going to use this term, it's ludicrous. Mm-hmm. And I say that because, again, loyalty actually, it entails more than if you see me once a year and you can mark on your calendar, you know the exact time you're going to see me at a certain time of the year, and at the end of that meeting, whatever it's about, only one of the two parties walks away with something there, and the other one is left with absolutely nothing. Uh-huh. How would you consider that a meeting that you're actually looking forward to? Somebody's going to be looking forward to it, but it's going to always be the person who benefits or gains from that. Mm-hmm. So in a sense, the loyalty that we're talking about, or the type of loyalty we're talking about, it actually now, to me, I really can't say or fault Senator Clinton for taking advantage of that. I'm more now in the mindset that my community in particular should be more aware, especially after all of the statistics and all the facts that everybody on here has mentioned tonight and prior to tonight, that should at least make somebody more conscious and say, you know what, I went to the store and I spent $150, but when I got ready to empty my basket into my car, I only had really 2 or 3 bags. So you're assessing what you're really getting for your money.
Correct. Great point.
We're not talking about money in the sense, but we're talking about value in terms of why do we think, or why should we really be obligated, in a sense, to say yes to Hillary Clinton and not even give any. Because the other part of this loyalty that I really want to point out, in many cases, if you talk to people, they haven't even considered or looked at what the other candidates are bringing to the table.
Come on, Aaron. Yeah, exactly.
There's no wisdom at all in looking at somebody or just checking off a box just because the name rings the bell or the name, is familiar. See, it's what gets us in trouble the most of the time when we're familiar with somebody and haven't given another person an opportunity to even match or meet what our expectations are.
Well, I'll tell you, Aaron, you just led me into a very twofold question, and I'm going to ask it to you, I'm going to ask it to Nikki, as well as Dave. Now, you mentioned this thing called loyalty, okay? And we know from historical facts, we know from Jim Crow, segregation, and on back to slavery. We know that loyalty was the greatest attribute that the slave and the slave master had between the two. So let me ask you this, Mr. Hopkins, Ms. Bedrick, and Mr. Lamont. Is this loyalty, or can this loyalty be considered the same type of loyalty that was to the slave master? That's my first question. The second question is this, Mr. Hopkins, Ms. Bedrick, and Dave. If the black minister is supposed to be the leader in the community, in the church, in the neighborhood, or whatever you want to call it, if he or she is not given what we're talking about tonight, the flock, the opportunity to have a choice versus this loyalty to a candidate just because of, is he in fact leading the sheep astray? 2-part question. I'll start with you, Aaron. I'll go to Nick, and then I'll come back to Dave.
Absolutely. And I'm going to tell you this, Aaron, from personal experience. Again, we're talking about any candidate. Now, this goes on in local politics, it goes on in state politics, and of course it goes on a national level. And we have recently seen where civil rights icons, many of whom are pastors, whether they're pastors of a church congregation or they at one time presided over a church. Mm-hmm. It is the connotation that comes with the term pastor that many candidates feel so comfortable in that they can almost be guaranteed the vote in the black community can come through a relationship with such a said pastor. Mm-hmm. Now, why is that a problem? We should ask the question, why is that a problem? Mm-hmm. Or just assume or say that is a problem. Well, now, this is Aaron Hopkins' viewpoint on this. I keep in mind I live in Texas. I live in Dallas, Texas, which is one state in what's called the Bible Belt. There are a few other states included, but I'm going to deal with Texas. This is the capital of the mega church. This is the place where many pastors who are, if they're starting out in their career, they can come to this area and have a church that will flourish simply because there's an assumption that if you aspire to be known, heard, or seen in a religious atmosphere, one of these states that I mentioned as part of the Bible Belt is where you can best be successful.
Mm-hmm.
Now, politics, when it's an historical fact that I just mentioned, civil rights leadership, for the most part, have always come through the black church. So if I am a candidate for any type of political office, I feel confident that I can gain the vote of the black community by simply showing up and showing that I have some allegiance, or that I'm sympathetic to the problems and the issues that go on in the black community. Not saying now that I intend to fix or help or change that condition.
Mm-hmm.
As long as I can show or say that I'm with you all in a basically in a virtual state. Again, unless you hold me accountable to what I'm saying, then guess what? You really can't say anything after the fact if I don't deliver on a promise.
Mm-hmm.
That if the history was different and we were more capable of holding these people accountable when they come and because in many cases, Baron, we have to just be real. They don't even ask for our vote.
Amen. Amen.
I'm just being real.
Uh-huh.
They just come in that same vein that I'm describing. So at some point, somebody has to ask a question, and if it's the pastor who's initiating it, some cases it is, some cases it isn't. But I'm going to deal with a situation where I know for a fact a pastor initiated and took upon himself, because you can't really endorse a candidate.
Right.
You know, if you're a religious leader. I'm not charging anybody with that. But what I'm saying, sometimes it's not what you say, it's what you don't say.
Amen.
How your actions speak. So everybody can see that you're endorsing a certain person. If there's an open invitation to come to my church and you address my members, you see what I'm saying?
Uh-huh.
That is a favor that may not have been actually, that this person may not be worthy of.
Mm-hmm.
But somewhere down the line, there has been some sort of either accommodation or some sort of agreement made that when it comes time, dear pastor, and I know that I need the population of your community's votes in my favor, I will be paying you a visit.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I want to turn the table back on us as a community. There's nothing wrong with presenting a number of expectations to say, if we're going to give you the opportunity to, even ask us for our vote, here's what we expected to do.
Amen.
There's nothing outside of reality that says that should not happen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, Aaron, hold that point. Yeah, hold that point, Aaron. Dave Lamont and Nikki, do you remember the question? Because I want to make sure that we get both points of views on this. Then I'm going to bring another guest in, Vanessa Gazi, but I'm going to let her kind of listen in on what we're talking about. Dave, Nikki. Dave, you go first, then Nikki. Do you need me to repeat the question, or you're still kind of following the format on the question itself?
I need the question again.
Okay. Dave Lamont, how about you?
Yeah, go ahead. I have a thought about it, but
okay, Nikki. Aaron Hopkins so eloquently talked about the loyalty. Okay, and we're equating this loyalty, or we're asking about this loyalty. Can this loyalty that African Americans have to the Clintons and or the Democratic Party, without considering other choices outside of the Democratic Party and or the Clintons, can this particular loyalty be associated between the slave owner and the slave master when they had loyalty back during those days? And if that is the case, if the minister is in the community, if the minister is supposed to be the leader, to lead the sheep from going astray, if he is not providing his congregation with particular options other than the obligation, is he leading the sheep astray, in your opinion?
No, Baron, I don't think I'm qualified, being white, to answer the first part of the question,
okay.
The loyalty of the slave to the slave master. But I know psychologically continued debasement over hundreds of years does to a people what I cannot imagine. I know what it would do to a person. So the loyalty to the slave master engendered in fear and violence and systematic over 300 years and then continued through Jim Crow. I feel eminently unqualified to answer that part of the question. It was my experience. But I can certainly understand the conditions of it. What I can answer and what I will answer is the minister's obligation to his flock.
Okay, go right ahead.
I'm Catholic, and it's worldwide known the abuses of the priest and the molestation of boys throughout the Catholic Church worldwide. Okay? My ministers, my priests had an obligation, a moral obligation, an obligation as the protectors of the flock, the informers of the flock, suffer the little children to come unto me. It was children that were being abused. And the outrage that I felt, okay, against my church for cover-up, for not exposing, for all of those, was real and took me out of my church for a while. My church no longer looked like it was supposed to look. It no longer looked like Jesus. It no longer looked like those things. I think a minister has every moral. If you call yourself a Christian, and we go back to Christianity originated social justice. The widow, the orphan, the poor. Jesus was crucified with a thief. I think it's a deep moral obligation. You have your parishioner's life in your hands, that if something is amiss, you cannot lead your flock to the slaughter. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm passionate on that. So if that answers the question, and I think if ministers are not opening their parishioners' eyes, I mean, Father, forgive them if they don't know what they do, but if they know what they do, I think it's morally reprehensible.
Well, let's take what you're saying, Nikki. If and we know that people are paid off because politicians are paid off, mainstream media pays off people, so we know that those who are supposed to be of the cloth that are not, they are getting paid off too. So if they are intentionally misleading their flock, are they missing the moral obligation to be an effective leader within a community? And if that be the case, are they in fact misleading the sheep and letting them go astray?
Yes.
Okay, Dave Lamont, you want to take a shot at it, or we need to go to the next question? I'm going to bring Vanessa in, but I want to make sure that I give you an opportunity to touch every point, because tonight what we're trying to do is make sure the number one thing is let the black community, let them take a hard look at Bernie Sanders before voting out of obligation for Hillary Clinton. Now, if you take a hard look at Bernie Sanders and you decide that he's not your guy with an open mind, then that's fine, because we're not saying tonight to not vote for Hillary, which we have said in the past. But what we're doing is tonight, we're backing off of that. We're trying to be logical and have an open and honest discussion to say that we need to stop being hoodwinked. We need to stop being bamboozled. We need to stop being paid off. We need to stop being misled, even if it's by somebody who is supposed to be of the cloth. Because here's the deal. It's not a judgment, it's a fact. If somebody claims to be of the cloth, they shouldn't be leading me off the cliff. I should be able to go off the cliff on my own. So, Vanessa Gazi, when we look at what we're talking about tonight, I know you're just coming in about 5 or 10 minutes ago, but we're talking tonight about why the black community should take a hard look at Bernie Sanders before voting out of obligation for Hillary Clinton. We're talking to Dave Lamont, screens from the Sun out of Colorado, talking to Aaron Hopkins out of Dallas, Texas, and we're talking to Nikki Bedrick out of Las Vegas, Nevada. You're joining us from Houston, Texas. What would you like to add to the conversation, Vanessa, in your own way regarding the conversation that we're discussing tonight?
Well, as far as the church is concerned and your pastors and things of that nature, when you're dealing with people, it doesn't matter who they are, black, white, Chinese, it doesn't matter. We all have the same emotions. We all look up to somebody that's in authority. And the problem with a lot of us looking up at people with authority is that we do not question authority. Mm-hmm. So when they tell us that, we take it at face value that they're telling us the truth, because we don't want to believe that they would lead us astray. Even if they, it's like Bernie and Hillary and Trump and all the other candidates. All we know is what they're showing us. All we know is we don't know what they do behind closed doors. We don't know what they say behind closed doors. Because as a matter of fact, Hillary got a little busted in Flint on the debate thing. That one of her aides made a comment that she said that she didn't want Snyder to resign. Mm-hmm. But when she got to the podium, what did she say?
Exactly. Flip-flop.
She agreed with Bernie Sanders. So it's like, God He shines light on things even if we decide we're not going to look at it. If we want to be in denial, if He's trying to show you that, okay, this person said something and then they turn around and they said something else, why are you not paying attention to that?
Exactly.
So
exactly.
We as human beings, it's just like our parents. We don't question our parents because that's authority. Mm-hmm. Our pastors to us are authority because they're supposed to be the experts. You don't tell your parent how to raise you. Your parent tells you how they're going to raise you. So it's like we've been conditioned from the zygote stage, that this is when you just don't question authority most of the time, and that's where we lose out because a lot of our authority are not experts.
Right.
They are corrupt. They may be corrupt. They may be, out there, just doing things that they ain't got no business doing. And I've seen people that won't question their pastor. If their pastor tells them something wrong, they just leave it at that. Oh well, he that's just my pastor. He just the way he is.
Right.
But why are you listening? You can't listen to that. You have to question authority sometimes. We have to dig deeper. We have to stop being surface people, and we have to stop being superficial about everything, especially politics.
Well,
because people don't do politics.
I think
just listen to what they're telling you.
Vanessa,
you have to get it.
Yeah, I think Aaron Hopkins talked specifically about exactly what you're saying. But let's throw a little bit more red meat out here. Now, some that's out there now might argue that it's unfair to judge Hillary Clinton for the policies her husband championed years ago. But see, here's the deal. Hillary was not picking out China while she was First Lady. She bravely broke the mold and redefined that job in ways no woman had ever before. Okay? She not only championed for her husband, Bill, she also wielded power and significant influence once she became elected, lobbying for legislation and other measures. Okay, we know that in her support of the 1994 crime bill, she used racially coded rhetoric to cast black children as animals. Let's check the record. They are not just gangs of kids anymore. They are often the kind of kids that are called super predators. No conscience, no empathy. We can talk about why they ended up that way, but first we have to bring them to heel. That's what she said. Now, both Clintons now express regret over the crime bill, and Hillary says she supports criminal justice reform to undo some of the damage that was done by her husband's administration. But on the campaign trail, she continues to invoke the economy and the country that Bill Clinton left behind as a legacy she would continue. So here's the deal. What exactly did Clinton's economy look like for black Americans? Take a hard look at this recent past about some of the things between Bernie and Hillary. It's about whether the Democratic Party can finally reckon with its policies that have done to African American communities, and whether it can redeem itself and rightly earn the loyalty of black voters. Now, Clinton's administration, the truth about it is more troubling. Now, unemployment rates, they sank to historically low levels for white Americans in 1990. The jobless rate among black men in their 20s who didn't have a college degree rose to its highest level ever. This increase in joblessness was propelled by the skyrocketing incarceration rate. To make matters worse, the federal safety net for poor families was torn to shreds by the Clinton's administrations in efforts to, guess what, end welfare as we know it. By 1996, the penal budget was twice the amount that had been allocated to food stamps. Clinton once again said, they are just gangs of kids, or not gangs of kids. They are super predators. Now, she said that in support of the 1994 crime bill. Going back to what you said, Vanessa, I'll bring it to you, Nikki. Why should the community as a whole and people as a whole not question authority rather than just go with it out of obligation? We need to make sure that we hone in on that point in the final 27 minutes of the segment. Nikki Bedrick.
I think the black community, which these two, welfare reform and the crime bill, were absolutely aimed at, need the leaders. I love the Color for Change and Black Lives Matter, the young organizations that are springing up that are trying to educate. But I think that the black community needs to be educated. It needs to start looking. You know, I looked closely at the Welfare Reform Act and what it's actually meant in a very tangible form for black families. Can I read something, Baron?
Yeah, go ahead.
I need about 5 minutes. So in 1996, President Clinton signed a bill that he said would end welfare as we know it, and it did just that. It took the Aid to Families with a Dependent Children program, which at that time was a cost-sharing program between the federal government and states, to dispense cash benefits to poor mothers. And it turned into what we have today, the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families Block Grant. Ostensibly, its purpose was the same, but its block grant structure meant the federal government would no longer share a portion of the burden of the cost. Instead, TAMPs today is in the hands. Today, hands are given some to the states no matter what the demand might be, and issues them loose guidelines on how to administer the country's only cash benefit program. The federal government hasn't increased the money it gives to the states since 1996, so that money has eroded 28% due to inflation. Meanwhile, the few guidelines the states have to follow have little to do to incentivize them to help more poor people, quite the opposite. They have every reason to try to reduce their rolls and free up more funds. Usually 8% of that money has gone to work-related programs, and they move things around to cover up holes in the state budget. Sometimes that extra money goes to related programs like child care and job training, but states often use it to just plug budget holes. That means that the share of eligible families who actually get through help through TAMF keeps steadily falling. The point where just 26% of poor families with children are enrolled, compared to 72% before the reform went into effect. Just real quick, what TAMF is. It restricted eligibility for cash welfare, introduced a 5-year limit on benefits, imposed strict work requirements, making it harder for poor mothers to earn a college degree, a sure way out of poverty. A 4-year college degree could no longer be claimed as a work-related activity, and the person was no longer eligible. In 1995, 649,000 student parents were receiving benefits. That's mothers going to school. In 2004, that number was 35,000. From over 500,000 to 35,000 in 2004. It changed public assistance from federal entitlement programs to state block grants, giving states enormous flexibility on how to spend these funds. It contributed to the revival of Jim Crow-like practices and exclusions which have flourished in the South. Southern states have largely dismantled their welfare system and pay some of the lowest benefits in the nation. In all 50 states, TANF benefits are 50% below the poverty line, and in 30 states, TANF benefits pay half someone's rent. I mean, it's how does a poor working mother, who is 1 in 3 American black males are incarcerated and she has children, how does she live?
Dave Lamont
championed that bill.
Dave, you want to take a shot at Nikki's point?
Until she was held accountable about 4 days ago by, I think, a journalist and Bernie Sanders. And now she, of course, the day later, Bill comes out and says, oops, I'm sorry again, just like the time bill. This is what I believe that the black community can expect more of. How does she dismantle that apparatus?
Mr. Lamont, you'd like to take a shot at Nikki's question?
Well, I'm coming at this from a perspective of I'm white and I'm not religious. So I'm not going to presume to understand fully the play of black churches in regards to loyalty or obedience or whatever term we're going to use.
Okay.
But it was mentioned. Now, Hillary actually has a record of going out to black churches and speaking. So I think that there, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that shows a certain record. It shows that she goes out there. Now, from my perspective, I kind of see that as pandering. But we have to point out the fact that Sanders has not done this. But if he did start doing this, I think it would look like pandering to everybody, even though Hillary is, from my perspective, doing the same. So am I wrong in that assessment, or am I kind of pointing in the right direction?
Absolute right direction.
Go ahead, Aaron.
I think it's like Bill playing the saxophone.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I'll tell you.
From my perspective, I can't understand, I see those things as pandering versus, establishing a brand, loyalty, obedience, that sort of thing. I just see it as pandering, but that could be because of my perspective of not being religious and also being white and outside the community. So that's the only thing that I can add, and it's more of a question than an answer.
Okay. Aaron, Vanessa, you want to take a shot at Dave's question?
Yes, I do, Baron.
Go ahead.
Dave, you actually you're dead on, you're spot on in your outlook and your view of what that is. And I think one of the things I want to add to what you're saying, see, it has to be introduced to the people who are going to receive that message as something different. And that's where I'm going to say it is the moral obligation, again, of the pastor to filter that message. So, in other words, if I introduce Hillary Clinton as a candidate for presidency to my congregation, and I don't give them, the people who receive that message, a realistic expectation of what they should be listening for and what they should respond to, as well as giving Senator Clinton up front. See, I think this is the pandering part, Dave, comes from, it's not necessarily either candidate that's doing the pandering. They have the ability to do this false loyalty, to have each pastor do it for them. This is the problem, and this is why I asked the question about the moral responsibility. Now, I'm going to kind of go in a little bit different direction. I'm going to be very quick about it, though. Baron, you heard me say this before. To me, it's an outright travesty. Mm-hmm. Any religious leader, I don't care what the denomination, I don't care whether it's Judaism, whether it's Christianity, whether it's Islam. In my mind, the script has been flipped in terms of politics presents itself as an authority, when it should be the absolute opposite. The moral authority has the right and should enforce the correction of corrupt politics. In other words, you shouldn't invite me as a pastor to do a prayer over your political breakfast, and then after that sit down. I'm listening to deals being made, people being accommodated, and people involved in my corruption, that if I'm a religious person, not question and speak about that. Nikki just said, somebody has the right to question and should question things that we already know. We're not talking about stuff that we don't know is wrong. We're talking about a history of wrongdoing that these same people that are in these positions of a pastor or a religious leader, they don't even have the moral character to question these things. So how can correction even come if the person who has that position as a leader won't question it himself? So you're absolutely right, Baron. You lead a congregation of people who are dependent upon that leader to do for them what they, at some point, will do for themselves if they're being led correctly. But if they're not being led correctly, and that person allows the pandering to continue, David, that you mentioned, because that is exactly what that is.
Right, exactly.
So the question now is it going to be, are these pastors going to be open to listen to somebody because that criticism is coming we're starting to hear it, whether it's coming from an organization like Black Lives Matter or other organizations that are saying now, enough of the pandering.
Right.
Enough of you coming to our congregation only when it's time to get our vote. Enough of saying one thing in one arena and then standing up, Vanessa, and saying something totally opposite of what you just said in somebody else's market. Right,
and that's what again. I want to make sure that anybody that's out there listening, or go back and listen to the archives. Now, this specific show is not an indictment on anybody. Now, Aaron Hopkins knows, along with Vanessa, that when we do a show that we specifically want to indict somebody, we will do that. But what we're trying to do is open up the eyes so they can see. Peel the scale off their eyes so they can become aware of choices. Choices are about having the option to choose one that's better than the other. And oftentimes, like it has been stated, obligation, poor leadership, or whatever the case may be, has led us down a path of destruction, in some cases in the black church, in some cases by false leaders, and in many cases by the candidate, him or herself, coming in and selling us a bill of goods that have no intention outside other than to gain the vote from the people. Now, Jody Moncrief, which is one of Dave Lamont, screened from the center of Friends. He's out there steady talking about Ted Cruz. So is there anybody on the line, Nikki, Dave, Aaron, Vanessa, or anybody else, who would like to talk or say anything, pros or cons, about Ted Cruz, since there is an individual out there who is specifically talking about Ted Cruz is the man. They also indicated that Bernie Sanders is a racist. See, I don't like all those games just to be playing games, because, see, I'm too old to play games, number one. Now, if somebody want to come in and talk about factual information like we've tried to provide tonight, they may do so. Any takers on Ted Cruz? Nikki, start with you. Vanessa, then we'll go to Dave, then we'll go to Aaron. None. Dave Lamont.
I have nothing to say.
I do have a question.
Okay.
In terms of Ted Cruz, all of us can remember, because it was not very long ago, that there was an uproar on the birthplace and the nationality or origin of the birth of President Barack Obama. Does anybody remember that?
Yes, sir.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Can somebody tell me where Ted Cruz was born?
No.
Ontario, Canada.
David?
Yes, sir.
I knew it was outside the United States.
My question is, does that not disqualify him to become President of the United States?
Okay. I've been asked this question before.
Go ahead, Dave.
I'll make it as brief as possible. Technically, yes, but for the same reasons that Obama is also technically yes. And those reasons are, it was established in 1979 by the court that citizenship by birth to an American citizen or citizens was the same thing as natural birth. It wasn't adjudicated by the Supreme Court. It didn't get that high before the court case ended. But we have a precedent saying that if you were born to one or more parents that were an American citizen, then you are an American citizen at birth, and it is assumed that you're a natural-born citizen. Now, the question that I raised was some research was done into Ted Cruz's background, and Ted Cruz's mother in 1974 appeared on a preliminary voter roll in Canada. And the only way you can do that is if you are an American citizen. Now, she has been married twice, both Canadian citizens. One of them was Rafael Cruz, Ted Cruz's father, who was a Canadian citizen at the time that he married her. Now, she would have been offered Canadian citizenship. So the question about Ted Cruz's eligibility is we need to look and see if Ted Cruz's mother was indeed a citizen of Canada or the United States in 1971 when he was born.
Dave Lamont.
Barack Obama never had that problem. Barack Obama's mother was always an American citizen, so by that 1978 court case, he was a natural American citizen at birth.
Correct.
Harvard law professor says that at the time Ted Cruz was born, his mother was a registered voter of Canada.
I have not seen that as confirmed yet. I have seen those allegations made. Basically, we need to do the equivalent of a Freedom of Information Act to Canada to try and get their voter registration rolls around the time that he was born to see if she is a registered voter. Because by law, only Canadian citizens can vote in Canadian elections. So she's on those rolls. She was a citizen, and therefore Ted Cruz is not a natural-born citizen by the definition of the 1979 court case.
So Dave Lamont and Nikki, why hasn't any Anglo-Saxon contested that to determine whether or not this guy is in fact a natural-born citizen? Just out of curiosity. I mean, do you have any indication? Just like
because he's not black.
Mm-hmm.
He looks white. He's got a name that sounds like Tom Cruise, and he sounds white.
Okay, Vanessa, Aaron, you got any response to that?
No.
Barry, you have two white people telling you that.
Which is exactly why I led you guys into that question. I mean, hey, look, I didn't say this. You know, somebody else said it, so I'm only going off of what has been provided to me, just as you guys rely on us when we provide something from the African-American community. It's an exchange. So I am perfectly okay with the answer. Vanessa or Aaron?
The only point I was making in asking the question is, holy hell was raised on the issue when it came to President Barack Obama, and both David and Nikki just answered for everybody.
Exactly.
The reason why.
Vanessa?
My only point.
Yeah, they answered that question quite well. That was why.
Hi, Vanessa.
Hi, Nikki.
How are you?
Hey, let me make sure I clear up this. Jody Moncrief, you out there. You're talking about Barron is scared of Ted Cruz. Barron is not scared of anybody. I have told you that you can come on this line right now. You can bring Ted Cruz on this line right now. You can bring Donald Trump or any other of those Republican cronies out there on this line right now, and we all can sit back and talk. Now, I'm not going to tolerate you making accusations. Now, you can say whatever it is you want to say, but when you point the finger in the wrong place and you make the wrong accusation, then you push me in a corner, and then you're going to wish that you never known me, because I'm going to really take it personal, and I'm going to drive you to a place that you've never been driven to. So I'm going to warn you. Okay, now, I am not afraid of Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz is a phony, just like you are acting like a phony right now. If you want to engage in this conversation, pick up the phone and dial 773-897-6398 and talk with some logic. Otherwise, I'm going to ignore anything else that you post from this point on. Dave Lamont, Nikki, go ahead on.
Go ahead, Nikki.
Where are we?
Well, what we're doing is we're trying to deal with a lot of ignorance right now. If a person wants to support Ted Cruz, that's fine. I don't understand how a person can get that you are a racist. And I've tried to explain to this young gentleman that a black person cannot be racist, because we cannot oppress, we cannot suppress, we don't have power, we don't have control. We can be prejudiced, we can hate, but we cannot be a racist. Then stop the lies about him. Ted Cruz is not a lie. What we're going to do, Jody, I'm going to make sure that I'm going to make your job hard. I'm going to make sure that you're blocked. Okay, you're going to have to go and create another profile, because you're acting a little bit what we call unbecoming. Go right ahead, Nikki.
There is no such thing as a black being able to be racist, because it carries no power.
Exactly.
No power. And it is the ignorant man's defense argument, be-all, end-all to any kind of open discussion. If I have on social media just simply called as you're being called a racist because you are. Okay, to many whites.
Exactly.
If truly you're open-minded and willing to, with empathy, hear another's point of view, and
exactly.
look at yourself and suspend your beliefs for a moment, or suspend your own religion and culture for a moment, and look at this in any objective term. Okay, that we have a deep, desperate racial divide in the country, and
absolutely.
And like it's like looking at posts of Obama that become personal. Okay, you can decide, you can have an opinion. He's a good president, bad president. Okay, you like his policies, you didn't. But when the attacks become personal, it's racist. It's my contention that Trump and his shenanigans have given everyone there is license to crawl out from under the rock.
Dave Lamont.
Well, if we're talking about the Republican Party, I think that what we're seeing is the front runners of the GOP are authoritarian. Ted Cruz is an authoritarian theocrat, and Donald Trump is an authoritarian Catholic. So, that being said, I think that shows what the Republican Party's nature is today. And that is that they respect authoritarianism over everything else.
Aaron Hopkins.
Yes, sir. Ben, I want to attempt to answer the other part of your question. I think we glanced over it a little bit, but it dealt with the slavery, the mentality of a slave in terms of if that plays a part of the loyalty that we tend to give in terms of, in this particular case, Senator Clinton. And I thought a long time about this, and here's what I see. And this is Aaron Hopkins' version of it. Because we are coming from the the position that everybody so well described just a few minutes ago in terms of the power it takes to enforce your will on another people. Knowing that you do not have that, it seems that anybody who does have authority, because authority was used in the dehumanization of us as a people, that because that fear is so deeply ingrained in us for the lashing out or the reprimand or the physical torture if we don't submit to the will of that kind of mind. Now, I hope I'm making sense.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So, in terms of the loyalty that we see when it's presented the way it's presented, we've become so comfortable with very little in terms of where we are coming from. So, all of Senator Clinton, and I don't want to just, we're specifically talking about her tonight, but I want to make sure everybody understands. She is not the only person that has done it and probably will not be the last person to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Use that very same loyalty that in terms of what we give from our community to people who have not earned and in many cases have not even asked for our support. If the same vehicle is used that everybody on here has agreed is used, which is it's either in the form of a black church, a black preacher, or somebody who has some ties to civil rights, past, present, and hopefully future, then all that is going on is this person is showing or verbally stating a position of sympathy to get from us what we can't hold that person accountable for after we give it. And that's a travesty in itself.
Well, I just got a message.
No, Aaron, as you were thinking, I was thinking of Dr. King. And Dr. King used his moral authority and moved mountains. And I don't think I ever in life saw anyone that had moral courage, the moral courage. And was superior to the moral insult, knew he was superior to the moral insult. And he moved a people. He moved a people. And he moved a people in their faith. You know, and I think that is sorely missing in the black community today. If there were more leaders with that kind of moral courage, I think it would benefit the people so much. If moral leaders don't step forward, we're going to have burning in the cities.
Amen.
You know?
Amen.
I mean, enough is enough is enough is enough, and the militarization of it. Let me just say real quick, I brought up 4 children. Okay, they're all past 30 now. Okay. My children had their run-ins with pot and did the things that teenagers do. I once was called, one of them was taken to the police station with an open container in the car. I got the courtesy call to come get. One was arrested at Disneyland with paraphernalia and pot. I got the call from Disneyland jail, come and get. I personally know about 8 kids in my community that overdosed. I know my kids did not go to the black community to get their drugs. I never once saw a SWAT team in my neighborhood.
Lord have mercy. This is another show.
The police would come, you know, and that's the condition in poor black neighborhoods today.
And you know, Nikki,
no, and
not meaning to cut y'all, but while it's on my mind, if the white community would be as honest as you are right now, we all could move forward rather than continue to deny that there are inconsistencies and injustices in this country. We're going to always have those problems. Thank you for being honest.
The white community looks at the 16 bullets put in Laquan McDonald. They look at it. They look at that video, and they say there's something in them that says, you know what, he deserved it. You know, they're looking at these things happen to these young black men by our police in the streets, and they're saying, you know, if he hadn't resisted arrest, if the boy hadn't had a spike gun in his hand, if, no thought of due process, no thought of the boy being arrested, charged, trial, plea, any of those things. Somehow he's deserved it, and that is what Bill and Hillary Clinton are really guilty of. The idea that the young black man is a criminal.
Well, I'll tell you.
Permeates the white society.
I'll tell you, Nick. I'll tell you, Nikki, Dave Lamont. Here's what we're going to do. We are still broadcasting live, but we've gone into recording. I just got a message that this conversation, there needs to be a part B. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give the mic, Aaron Hopkins, Dave Lamont, Vanessa Gazi, and Nikki. I'm going to give you guys the mic on Thursday night. What I'm going to ask you to do is this, is that between now and Wednesday afternoon, 5 o'clock, somewhere there, please give me some type of subject matter that you guys would be willing to talk about, 8 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time if you are available, because I'm going to sit back and we're going to let you guys come in and continue talking about this. You can come in your own way, your own shape, your own form, or your own fashion. Because, see, we believe that not just my voice need to be heard, but all of our voices need to be heard. And this is a platform where we allow other people to come in. So if you guys will consider that, accept this invitation, because I want all messages out there. I want everybody to be heard that has a voice, that's willing to have the courage to come on and do it. So 8 o'clock Thursday night, Dave Lamont, can you be available that night to do this continuation in any way, shape, form, or fashion with your own subject? I'm going to go with you. Can you do it, Dave?
Absolutely.
Okay. Aaron Hopkins, can you do it? Aaron, are you out there? I know you're out there because you're messaging me. Are you on mute? Are you out there?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Thursday night, 8 o'clock. Can you come in your own way, shape, form, or fashion and provide me by Wednesday with the subject matter so I can get it to the administrative assistant so we can get this out there, publicized the way that we need to? Can you commit to 8 o'clock?
Absolutely.
Okay. Vanessa Gazi.
Yeah.
Okay. Nikki.
Yes.
Okay, now it's you guys' show now. You're going to be live, bringing in your own way. You can bring in your own guests. You can do whatever. We're going to give you a full hour and 30 minutes. We're going to sit back and we're going to talk about whatever it is that each one of you guys want to talk. Aaron, what I'll do is, since you're familiar with the format, I'll let you and Dave come on and do the moderation. Vanessa, you and Nikki can join in your own way, and I'm going to sit back and I'll just engage from the opposite side. Rather than hosting, I'm going to be co-hosting. So you just heard this live on the Smoking Glass Hour. I wish we can get Dr. Sally Broder, Nikki. I'm going to let you work on that because I love this lady and her opinions. She tries to be as honest and open as she can. I'm glad that we were able to connect once again tonight. We've been talking about this important subject, why the black community should take a hard look at Bernie Sanders before voting out obligation for Hillary Clinton. We're going to go ahead and close out the segment. Nikki, thanks for calling in. I'm looking forward to you on Thursday night. Again, if you can get that information to me by Wednesday, just a little, maybe 2 or 3 sentences about what you're going to talk about. Dave Lamont, as always, from screens from the center. Dave Lamont, I love it when you come on. You always bring this balance. Vanessa, you know I love you. I had to come on your post the other day and defend you, and I meant what I said. If somebody's got a problem with me, you send them to me and I'll take care of your problem. Aaron Hopkins, as always, brother, you bring the light that needs to be shined in the tunnel. We have a combination of women. We have a combination of men. We have a combination of black. We have a combination of white. We have a combination of old and young. We are a diverse group of people sitting here tonight having a balanced and civil conversation, something that you cannot see or will not see, hardly if ever, on Fox News, MSNBC, ABC, CBS, NBC. So what I'm saying is this. We are on the move in 2016. You've been listening to the Smoking Glass Hour with Baron Glass. I'm going to say good night to Nikki, good night to Dave Lamont, good night to Vanessa Gazi, and good night to Aaron Hopkins. I appreciate you guys calling in. What a wonderful show. Good night.
Good night, Baron.
Good night.